willing to tell the truth about the crimes and conduct of Donald Trump. And he's with us here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Chris Christie.
Well, good evening, everybody out there in Country First Land. I thank you for inviting me on tonight and giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you about the issues that we just laid out in the video that preceded me, but also to talk about all the other issues that concern us as a country. And I thank Congressman Kinzinger for the invitation to be here tonight as well. Look, I'm running for president because the truth matters. It's not negotiable. The truth is not something that we get to pick and choose based upon what our own political leanings or party registration might be. The truth is the truth. And the American people have to start hearing the truth directly from people who aspire to leadership here. And when I look at my own party, one of the biggest reasons I got into this race is because no one was telling the truth about Donald Trump. What was going on was excuse making and rationalizing, and in some instances, just flat out lying about what happened in the 2020 election. The facts are pretty simple, everybody. Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in the 2020 election. In fact, he defeated Donald Trump as decisively as Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton just 4 years earlier. And from the minute that election night happened, I began urging the former president to tell the truth, concede the race, and to allow the peaceful transfer of power to happen without any drama and certainly without any violence. We all know what happened. And that's resulted in all of the cases that we now see filed against the former president. I want everyone to think about this. When the Republican candidates for president get on the stage this Wednesday, August 23rd, the frontrunner who has decided not to be there will be out on bail in 4 different jurisdictions: New York, Miami, Washington, and Atlanta. We can no longer pretend that this is normal. We can't pretend that this is acceptable. And all of us as Americans need to think, is this the example we want to set for our children and for our grandchildren? I say it's not. And I say that telling the truth is what matters the most in this race. And that's what I intend to do from the minute I got into the race until whenever it ends. And if you look at the way things are going right now, I really think that this message is getting through to folks. We had a new poll that came out today in the state of New Hampshire, which now shows me clearly in second place, in double digits at 14%, and now only 20 points behind Donald Trump. We are in striking distance, everybody, 2.5 months into this campaign. On Wednesday night, we intend to do the same thing. Listen to the questions, answer them directly and honestly, and if someone were to say something on stage that we think is wrong, untruthful, or just bad for our country, to be able to engage in that debate directly and clearly to lay out what I believe is the right direction for our country to move in. And so I thank you all for taking the time tonight. I hope we get into a lot of different issues that you're concerned about. I'm going to try to follow the same standard tonight on our town hall meeting that I follow at my town hall meetings around the country, and that I intend to follow on the debate stage Wednesday night. Listen clearly to your questions and try to answer them honestly and directly and responsively without stump speeches or canned lines that are provided to me by political consultants. So I want to thank Congressman Kinzinger again for inviting me tonight, and I look forward to working with you, Adam. Have a great night.
Hey, well, Governor, thank you. And everybody, thank you for being on. The governor and I have gotten to be fast friends lately, and there's a real kinship, I think, between what we've been through and the threat we see, and the fact that we know that America just needs a dose of truth. I mean, look, how can you expect the front runner to not be Donald Trump when anytime anything happens, everybody else that the base that the party looks up to is told by their leaders that he did nothing wrong? and that he's a victim of a witch hunt. And then they're surprised that somehow he's in first place in these debates. And so it's so refreshing to have somebody that tells the truth. And it's so refreshing that you're with us today, Governor. I just wanted to say that. And so it seems to me that the GOP primary is kind of really a referendum on Donald Trump. And one of the things with Country First is there are people, some would consider themselves from the left, some from the right, some from the middle. Some probably have no idea what they are anymore. But the one thing we all have in common and we all see eye to eye on is that Donald Trump is a threat to this country. And another term of Donald Trump would be a threat. You've decided to stand up and tell the truth, despite all that blowback that's coming your way, despite the price you'd have to pay. The question I have for you is, have you seen any break in the dam? Is there any particular message that seems to work with persuadable conservatives, persuadable Republicans that you've seen?
Adam, it's a really good question. And I think it's probably a little bit too early to tell. But the fact that in 2.5 months, Adam, I've literally gone from 0 in New Hampshire to 14 tells you that I think the truth does matter. And that people do want to hear the truth about Donald Trump, but they want to hear the truth about lots of other issues as well that people are not talking about, refusing to talk about in a way that's candid and direct with the voters. I will say that one of the things that I see a lot of nodding heads in my town hall meetings is about the idea that we cannot normalize this conduct for our children and grandchildren. That, the title of your group, Country First, is what we should expect from anyone who is privileged enough to be elected President of the United States. That you'll put your country before your own personal interests, because that's the oath you take when you promise that you're going to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And I will tell you that I have seen from Donald Trump and from Joe Biden too, that they've put their own personal interests ahead of the interests of the country. One of the things Donald Trump, and this gets a lot of applause at town hall meetings in New Hampshire and in South Carolina. So I talk about the fact that Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp, but instead all he did was rearrange it to make room for his own children to benefit from it. Like Jared and Ivanka Kushner, who took $2 billion in Saudi money after Jared Kushner and Ivanka were both employed in the White House, and Jared spent days upon weeks over in the Middle East, undercutting the efforts of our Secretaries of State, Rex Tillerson and Mike Pompeo, merely to set himself up for a payday afterwards. That, and then Donald Trump pardons Jared Kushner's father. And then, after he pardons his father, who committed some heinous federal crimes, he then donated $1 million to Donald Trump's super PAC. Is that draining the swamp? And we see with Joe Biden and the fact that his son Hunter looks like he was selling access to his father as vice president in order to make millions of dollars himself. If these two men can't run their own families, how do we expect to be able to run the country from the White House? And so I think those arguments, as to Donald Trump and as to Joe Biden, have resonated with folks. And we're going to continue to make those arguments because it's true. And it's what we would expect from a president, to rise above that and make sure that the public is put first, that the American people are put first.
Well, thank you. It's funny. I was remembering a time I was in the Oval Office with the former president. He had mentioned something about, he said, next term I'll deal with Social Security and Medicare. And then he goes on now to say, I'll never touch it. Everybody else wants to touch it. Look, I would love for us never to have to touch Social Security or Medicare, but math is math. And I think the American people know that they need to be spoken the truth to. And, you can pander forever, but eventually you're going to have to make decisions. So, there were thousands of people, Governor, that gave, some gave just $1, some gave a little more to get you on this debate stage. And I know that you've done very well getting on there, and you'll reach the thresholds for the next debates as well. But even with Donald Trump not showing up, which cowardice, by the way, absolute cowardice. And I think you are the only reason he's not coming, to be honest with you. Because any time that he's not in the spotlight, I think would drive him crazy, but he doesn't want to be in the spotlight with you. But it's going to be a contest among people to see who can defend the former president the most, the best, the hardest, while turning around and maybe attacking somebody else on the stage to try to show their tough bona fides. What do you say? What do you think that says about the state of the party at the moment, or the state of the GOP primary, when so many candidates are just afraid to say that the emperor has no clothes?
I think, unfortunately, Adam, what it says is that there are people up there with an agenda that is not about putting the country first. There are folks up there with an agenda to try to help themselves, perhaps, to become vice president of the United States if Donald Trump were the nominee, or to become a cabinet member for Donald Trump if he were to be reelected president again. Let me be clear. I got offered Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Homeland Security twice by Donald Trump, and I got offered White House Chief of Staff. And I turned them all down because I knew I couldn't work for someone like Donald Trump. And so, what it says is that some people are putting their own personal interests ahead of the country's interests. The other explanation for it is, for some folks, they believe this is a political calculus, that somehow Donald Trump will be defeated by the legal process. And that when he is, if they're the ones who have said nothing bad about Donald Trump, that they're more likely to inherit the Donald Trump voters. Well, I'll tell you something. If you want to know what a failure that strategy is, talk to me or Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or John Kasich or Ted Cruz, who all tried those types of tactics in 2016. And what it led to was Donald Trump being overwhelmingly nominated for president of the United States. If we are unwilling to stand up and fight him from minute one of this race, to say that this is not the kind of person that is acceptable to be president, this is not the type of person who any of us would want our children and grandchildren to emulate, if you're unwilling to say that, in my view, you have no business being on the stage on Wednesday night.
Well, thank you. And I think it's interesting that you talk about your experience in it, and you're open with it, and talking about the fact that, I think we all felt, even after he was elected in 2016, I just felt like I was still going to wake up from a dream, and see that. So just a quick reminder to everybody, you can continue to submit your questions. We're going to try to get to as many of those as we can in the Q&A. Governor, one of the initiatives that Country First had a ton of success with in 2022 was convincing disaffected Republicans, independents, Democrats even, to participate in GOP primaries to try to knock out the extreme anti-democracy candidates. Look, if you're going to live in a Republican district, maybe you should actually show up, just vote in that primary, because that's where the strongest part of that vote counts. We did have a lot of success with that. We even got some credit for defeating Madison Cawthorn in his primary. I'm curious what role you see for disaffected Republicans, for independents, for Democrats, folks who may not think that the GOP primary is for them, but they're desperate to see somebody who tells the truth, and they're desperate to defend this country. Do they have to wait for November to make a difference, or is there something they can do now?
No, depending upon what your state you're in and the rules of those states, you don't have to wait. If you care deeply, especially because there's not going to be a Democratic primary of any import in this race. I think Joe Biden, absent something very odd happening, will be the runaway Democratic nominee for president. What I want to do is speak to the whole country. There's no way that we can unite this country once again the way it needs to be united, Adam, if we don't first and foremost talk to the entire country. So in places like New Hampshire, if you're a dispirited Republican, you obviously can vote in our primary and make a difference. If you're an independent, you decide you want to have that influence on who the Republican candidate will be, it's an open primary. You can show up on election day, in primary election day, and vote in the primary. Same thing in South Carolina, and same thing in Nevada. So in 3 out of the first 4 races, people who really care about our country and want to try to unite our country and bring them together behind principles of truth and law and order and rule of law are going to have the opportunity to do that. And I'm not looking to do anything other than get the votes of every person who is concerned that having a president of the United States who stood behind the seal of the president in the East Room of the White House on election night 2020 and told the American people that the election had been stolen when he had no evidence that it had been stolen, and to this day has not presented any credible evidence that it was stolen, that's not the kind of person we want back in the Oval Office. And so we have to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And folks can do that by, as you mentioned, voting in the primary, even if they're disaffected. And also they can go to my website at chrischristie.com and donate to us so that we have the resources that are necessary to be able to wage the campaign in a way that it needs to be waged. Now, look, I do want to take this moment to say thank you to all the people of Country First, and there are thousands of them, who donated early on in this process for me to help me get past the 40,000 donor threshold. We're now past the 50,000 donor threshold and right at the 60,000 donor threshold. And it's in no shorted measure because of folks who are on this call tonight and others who belong to this organization for standing up and being willing to support me. So I want to thank you all for having done that. My voice wouldn't be on the stage but for that, and that help. And I appreciate what you've done very much. And I hope that you're all willing to support us in a number of other ways as well.
Well, thank you. So your message of courage and your show of courage, I think, has actually inspired a lot of people. You know, I'm going to guess that you probably didn't expect to be doing this well this early in New Hampshire. Maybe you did. But I know you knew from the beginning this is going to be a long slog of getting that message out. But we saw this poll today, you know, where you're second. You're beating Ron DeSantis, who, you know, just a couple months ago, everybody thought was the heir apparent to Donald Trump. One of the things that I've been disappointed in this primary is it seems that most of the candidates are running and, you know, seeing who can defend Trump, or it's all about attacking. But nobody's really bringing a positive vision for our country. You know, reasonable solutions, durable solutions. One of the things Country First members like, they don't have to agree or disagree with your policies, but they want to know that you believe it and that you want to solve problems. Like somebody on the far left is, you know, obviously a little different than me politically, but if they believe what they're saying, I have so much respect for that because we need those voices. You've differentiated yourself in that respect too, and I think we'd like to hear how you believe we can make American politics more productive and instead of just being destructive.
Well, Adam, look, I had a lot of experience at this. You've been elected in a blue state as well, in Illinois. I defeated an incumbent Democratic governor, one of only 3 incumbent Democratic governors who have been defeated in the last 30 years when I ran in 2009. But what I still inherited was a solidly Democratic legislature in both houses. And so what I had to learn as governor, coming off my experience as a prosecutor, was how to work and make sure that I drive things towards solutions. That this is not a game of politics. It's not a game where we sit back and forth and see how we can play with each other, but that we know that we have an obligation to the people who elected us to work with each other to try to get to solutions. And so from my perspective, my experience in 8 years as governor led to things like $120 billion in savings on our public pension plan that otherwise would never have happened. I eliminated 683 individual programs in our budget in my first year as governor when we had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. And so we did the things that we needed to do. And by the way, all of those things were passed with Democratic support because they couldn't have been passed otherwise. I want to try to bring the same sensibility to Washington, D.C., to know that what it takes is to show strong leadership, to come forward with your ideas, and then to work to get to know the folks in Congress and work hard to try to persuade them, both one-on-one and through the use of the bully pulpit. And so I care about us doing the big issues again, Adam. You mentioned entitlements. We have to deal with it because in 11 short years, Social Security will be bankrupt and it'll be a 24% cut in benefits. And in 10 years, Medicare will be bankrupt. These are very short windows. And I thought the most disgraceful part of Joe Biden's State of the Union address, which Donald Trump agreed with. So Joe Biden stood up and said, can we all agree we'll do nothing to Social Security. And both houses of Congress, both sides, got up and cheered. And I thought, what cowards and liars. Because they know this is what we're destined for and that something needs to be done. And we can help to fix this, as you know, Adam, by changing eligibility, not for people in their 50s or 60s or 70s, but to change it for people in their 20s and 30s and 40s when they have plenty of time to plan for their retirement. That's something we should look at. We should look at means testing. Do Mark Zuckerberg and Warren Buffett and Elon Musk really need to be collecting Social Security? Can we start there and have the conversation and see how we can work our way down to make sure that folks who are getting Social Security are the folks who really, really need it to be able to help themselves survive and thrive during retirement? We talked to folks about issues like education, where a third of the children in our country don't read at grade level. Yet we spend $800 billion a year on education across this country. 25% of our kids don't do math at grade level. Not only are they not going to be able to compete with the rest of the world, they're not going to be able to compete to get a great job here in America. That will affect our economy, but more important than that, it will kill their hope for their future. No one is talking about those issues. I took on the teachers union in New Jersey starting in 2009, head on head, and said, I'm for any teacher who puts their child in the classroom first ahead of their own personal interests. But the union always wants to protect the worst of their teachers rather than aspire for the best achievement for their students. We need to be having those conversations and a lot more, Adam. So I'll cut the answer short there, or maybe not so short. But then we'll go on to other issues as well. But those are the kind of things, big things, that I want our country to be doing again to set us up to be the dominant country in our next 250 years of existence, like we have been for much of our first 250 years.
Great. Can you guys hear me now, by the way? Is that anybody? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I switched settings, so I couldn't tell if it works. Let me know. Let me know if something goes wrong, team. So for those who may just be joining the tonight's conversation, we're reflecting on the importance of truth in principles in politics, and we're joined tonight by presidential candidate, former Governor Chris Christie, who's, I know, getting excited for this debate, and we're all excited to watch. So we do have some questions from the audience. So let's take our first one. It's looks like Ben in Nevada. It says, the question is for both Adam and the governor. Half of the time I struggle to find hope that our country is going to get through this chapter, but conversations like this remind me that there is hope out there and leaders who want to do something other than tear us apart. What's driving you when you get up every morning to continue doing and saying what you do? So go ahead, Governor. I'll let you take that first.
First off is I love my country. I mean, look, Ben, I have a dad who served in the Army during the Korean War, came home. His father had passed away. He was a young man. Family had no money. Went to work at the Breyers ice cream plant in Newark, New Jersey. A mom who never went to college, worked as a receptionist in an office. And the fact that their son is getting the opportunity to run for president of the United States is part of what the amazing, amazing opportunity this country gives to every one of his citizens who cares enough to try. And so first off, what drives me is the fact that I love this country. Second, I've already had a great American life. In 2 weeks, I'm going to turn 61 years old. And I've had a great life, and one that only this country could have helped me to provide for my wife and our children. But I want our children, and hopefully, God willing, someday our grandchildren, to have the opportunity at the same kind of American life, if not even a better one than the one that I've had. And I think we have to fight for that. I think Ronald Reagan was right when he said that the extinction of democracy is just one generation away. And so all of us have to fight to do it. Lastly, as Adam said, you know, I'm someone who was taught by my mom a very simple principle. And we lost her now 20 years ago. But my mom told me, Christopher, be yourself, because then tomorrow you don't have to try to remember who you pretended to be yesterday. The truth has always been something that has been emphasized in my nuclear family by my mom in particular, and it's being emphasized by me and my wife to our 4 children now. And how can I continue to emphasize how important that is to them if I knowingly sat by and did nothing, as someone like Donald Trump tried to, for a third time, get our party's nomination for president? So those are the things that get me out of bed in the morning. I'm sure a lot of those are similar for you too, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that it's like we're speaking from the same heart on that. And it's interesting. When I ran for Congress in 2010, I'd just gotten back from Iraq, and I just remember thinking, if we're asking young people to fight and die for our country, we have to be willing to give up our political careers for the same cause. I thought, honestly, I laugh about it because I'm like, I thought I may have to lose my job over like a vote on Social Security reform or something. Like maybe that would be the thing, not necessarily the defense of democracy, but I have no regrets. I have zero regrets. I know you have no regrets about defending democracy, because I know that there's not a single person out there that's going to be on that debate stage with you that's afraid to go after President Trump, that is not in 10 years going to look back and be ashamed of that performance of the debate. There is absolutely no way any of those people will look back and be proud that they didn't have the courage to take on this direct attack on democracy. So, Ben, thank you for that question. We've got another one. It's from one of the leaders participating in the Country First Academy, which that's our political incubator, political leadership incubator, Governor, where people want to get involved. They don't necessarily know how to start. This is how you start. We're identifying and training good pro-democracy candidates, especially at the local level. Says you and I, we both started our service on the local level. What advice would you give to the next wave of leaders who are walking into very toxic, divisive politics, and how can they be part of the solution? I'll add just a second to that, which is when you and I were younger, politics was done in I'll call it a gentleman, gentlelady way, that it hasn't been done like in a long time. How do we expect people under the age of 20 or 30 that've never seen that to kind of restore that? So what advice would you give somebody walking into that divisive politics, and how can they be part of a solution?
First is show up. So much of any adventure in life is about showing up, being present. And what that means is listening. So much of leadership, effective leadership, is listening. Listening to other people, listening to their concerns, listening to their arguments, either so you can agree with them or so you can try to debunk them. And I've been involved in doing both. I think secondly, it is truthfulness, that in the end, you have to be who you are. And one of the things that I did think even in this time remains a constant in American politics is voters are looking for authenticity. Now, like it or not, Donald Trump is authentic. He's just an authentic liar, but he is authentic. What we need, if you want to get involved in politics, is to be yourself, be authentic, show up, tell the truth, and work hard. And I will tell you that the cream always rises to the top, in my view. And especially when you begin at the local level, people are always looking for bright young people who want to dedicate some part of their life to public service. And so I was really lucky. I started off as a county commissioner when I was 31 years old. And, that progressed to ultimately me becoming the U.S. attorney under George W. Bush at 39 years old. And then led to me becoming governor at 47 years old. And all those things were things that I was able to accomplish through the help and support of lots of other great people, but also because I knew who I was, I said what I believed, I did what I said, and I kept my promises. I think those should be the hallmarks that should be a part of any young person's efforts when you're first starting to get involved in public life. But first and foremost, show up and be present. If you do those things, you'll get noticed.
Well, thank you. This next one, I'll be honest, kind of hits home for me a little bit. So I'll chime in at the end. They say, Governor Christie, you enabled and defended Donald Trump throughout his presidency. I'm having trouble getting over that, basically. Getting over that. How is this not too little too late?
Well, first off, as long as there's another election, it's never too late. But let me be very honest with you. You know, I ran against Donald Trump in 2016. He was not my first choice for president. I did the best I could to try to defeat him in 2016. I lost. And by the way, unlike Donald Trump, when I lost, I conceded the election and I moved on. But in our country, we don't always get to vote for who we want to vote for. We get to vote for who's left. And it was between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I so opposed Hillary Clinton's both attitude towards people and governance and her policies that I decided to support Donald Trump. And, you know, I thought, given the fact that I'd known him at that time for about 15 years, that I could help make him a better candidate, and if he won, a better president. Turned out I was wrong. And I'm willing to admit that I was wrong. And, you know, if you're looking for the perfect candidate, you're not going to find him on this call tonight. I am not the perfect candidate. But what I am is willing to continue to think and listen, and when I'm wrong, to admit it. When was the last time you heard somebody in politics, in today's American politics, actually admit they were wrong, even though we know there are people who are wrong every day because we're not perfect? And so I make no apologies for my support of Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. But when he undercut our democracy on election night 2020, I made it very clear on ABC that evening, and I urge you to go back and look at YouTube that night for the ABC coverage and look at what I said. And I made it very clear that I could not support someone who did that to our democracy. And so that's the explanation. It may satisfy you, it may not, but I can tell you it's the truth. It's why I made the decisions I made. I turned out to be wrong, but I'm not ill-intentioned, just wrong.
Well, thank you for that. And that's what I say, because I get asked the question sometimes too, is like, if we want to be at a moment right now where nobody is allowed to walk away from Donald Trump and fight for democracy, okay, but democracy will fail. Because I've got to tell you, in this moment, we have to have an uncomfortable alliance between Democrats, Republicans, independents, everything in between, people who never supported Trump, people who used to support Trump, people who never even paid attention to Donald Trump. We need that uncomfortable alliance to make sure we can keep arguing about these policies we're talking about, because we can argue if we have a democracy that's functioning. If we don't, we're going to be in a really bad place. So I get that people ask that question, but this is a moment where we have to stand up and say, things have changed. They particularly changed after January 6th and after the last election, when he directly started undercutting democracy in an even bigger way. And we have to have this uncomfortable alliance, or else, trust me, I really do believe this can fail if we don't. So I think the next question fits in, I think, pretty well with the last one. So as I mentioned, thousands of our members were able to pitch in to help you qualify for the debate stage. It's fair to say that a lot of those donors may not be Republican. They may even want a Democrat to be the next president, but they understand how important it is for there to be at least two healthy, honest, sane American parties. They value the role you're playing, and that for anyone who hasn't chipped in yet to help you get qualified for the second and third debates, you mentioned you're already almost there, even for the third debate. What case would you make for them to consider, even if they may not want to ultimately vote for you in the White House?
Look, if you think the truth matters, the truth needs to have a truth teller to be out on the stage and bringing it. And we now know that Donald Trump's probably not going to show up at the first two debates. If he shows up at the third one, which I suspect he might, because he's going to get pretty damaged in these first two by not being there, in my opinion, you're going to want me to be there to continue to bring it. And as I said to Adam, we're very, very close to getting over 60,000 donors now. And that would be the next threshold for the third debate. So what I would say to folks is, first off, you're going to want my voice to be on that stage to take him on directly, given everything we've talked about tonight and the video that you saw of other candidates in this race being unwilling, forget about to hold him criminally responsible, to even hold him morally responsible for what happened on January 6th, morally responsible for the undercutting of our democracy. I mean, to me, that's unthinkable. But that's exactly what will happen. It will be a job fair on the stage in the debate rather than to be a place where the truth is told, honest differences are aired out, and the public can make an informed decision. And by the way, I hope to earn your vote by the time we get to the general election. If you don't vote in our primary, but you're going to vote in our general election, you can be sure that if I'm the nominee, I'm going to be making the case right to you. Because remember, in New Jersey, we have 1 million more registered Democrats than we do Republicans. And so for me to get reelected in 2013 with 61% of the vote, I had to appeal to over 70% of independents who voted for me, over 26% of Democrats who voted for me, 29% of African Americans who voted for me. 1 year after Mitt Romney got 8% of African Americans in our state. And I got 51% of the Hispanic vote. 1 year after Mitt Romney got 21% of the Hispanic vote in our state. And so, you know, I have proven over the course of my career that I will go out and pursue every vote, even in places that typically make Republicans uncomfortable to campaign in, because I know who I am and I'm happy to make my argument to anybody. So I hope, one, you continue to help me to be on stage so I can continue to make this case, and two, that you'd be open-minded to listening to the real arguments and not be wed to voting for one party or the other. But let's try this. How about if we put the person with the best character in as the next president? If that's the way we made our judgment, then I think we would be better off as a country.
Well, Governor, thank you. And I wish we had much more time because I would love, as you know, I'm passionate about foreign policy and America's role in the world. And I think you have made a very powerful case, distinguishing yourself from some of these other, only thing I can say is clowns or not serious people on foreign policy, sympathetic to Vladimir Putin, you know, talking about, in essence, letting Taiwan go. Vivek, who comes up with some new harebrained scheme every day to get attention. I know that that's going to come up and you're going to be solid on that. And I wish we had a lot more time to talk about that. No matter what happens, and as you know, I'm a fan of you. You are a gift to our democracy, I think, by being out there right now, by speaking about this, by doing what so many people are afraid to do. You know, God puts all of us in different positions at different moments. I just couldn't imagine having been put in the position I was, or you being put in the position you are, and not just telling the truth with it, and knowing that you have millions of people there to listen. So I would encourage anyone that hasn't chipped in to help you get on the debate stage or to support your candidacy overall, go to chrischristie.com and do that. I would certainly encourage you all to do that. With that, Governor, thank you for your time. I'll turn it over to you to feel free with any closing thoughts you might have or anything you want to share.
Well, first off, Adam, I want to thank you for the invitation. And to everyone who's watching tonight, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your Monday evening here in August to listen to what I've had to say and what Adam's had to say. I also want to thank Adam for his service to this country, not only his service when he wore the country's uniform, but also when he served in Congress and did the very difficult things that needed to be done to speak out, not only on the issues that we had, regarding January 6th, but he's also been an honest, conservative voice for a lot of issues that we care about as a country. And so I want to thank you, Adam, for your service and your willingness to continue to serve by leading country first in the way that you are. Look, I ran for president to do the big things. What's happening in our politics today is we're getting smaller and smaller, getting divided into smaller and smaller groups that we're pitting against each other to argue about things that maybe aren't unimportant, but certainly don't rise to the level of a great country. And each and every time in our history, when we have been at a crossroads like we are now, we have been fortunate to have a great leader as president who led us to do the big things. So whether it started with George Washington, who along with John Adams and Alexander Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson said, no, we're not going to be willing to stay as a colony of Great Britain, but we're going to stand up and we're going to fight to be a country of our own, because it's the only way we can guarantee succeeding generations an opportunity at liberty and freedom. Think about if they'd done the other. In 1860, when Abraham Lincoln could have stood up and said, I'll let the South go. We'll be two countries. Instead, he said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And he inspired the American people to the sacrifice that was necessary to preserve the Union. And he came out of that bigger, stronger, richer, and freer than we were before. In 1941, Franklin Roosevelt could have said, this is a European problem, as many are saying today about Ukraine. He said this. He could have said this is not our problem, but instead he said we should be the arsenal of democracy, and we should stand up against the infamy that was being absolutely perpetrated against our country by both the Japanese and by the German and Italian armies. And so he inspired our country to great sacrifice again. And we lost hundreds of thousands of lives and untold fortune spent. But at the end, America was one of two superpowers in the world. And we came out of it richer and stronger and freer than we were before. And then in 1981, when there were some people who wanted us to just tolerate the Soviet Union, to put up with its existence, no matter how repulsive it was to us, we elected a president, in fact, a conservative Republican from a blue state in Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan said, we are going to consign the Soviet Union to the ash heap of history where they belong. And he inspired us to make great sacrifices, to put our country on a competition that we could win with the Soviet Union. And 8 years later, the Berlin Wall fell. And 10 years later, the Soviet Union was gone, no longer part of the world. Reagan, through his efforts and his inspirational leadership, led us to be braver, freer, stronger, richer. And at that time, the last remaining superpower. Today, our adversary is China. And the next 50 years is going to be a contest between the United States and China as to who will lead the world. Will be a democracy or will be the Communist Party of China? That fight's already going on in Ukraine, everybody. And we should support the Ukrainians to the fullest extent we can to make sure they send a message to Russia, who's being funded in this war by the Chinese, that we will not tolerate that type of autocratic, awful conduct anywhere in the world. And so, same way Reagan led us, FDR led us, Lincoln led us, and Washington led us, we need a president who will stand up and do the same thing. That election in 1980 was between an ineffective, ineffectual president and Jimmy Carter, who Joe Biden called his favorite president, against a conservative governor from a blue state. Ronald Reagan won that fight overwhelmingly against Joe Biden. And if you give me the chance, I will win that race as well. And I will work hard every day to not divide our country, but in fact, quite the opposite, to bring it back together so that we can feel proud to be Americans again and that we can feel as if our democracy is being defended. So thanks for the time, Adam. I really appreciate it. I look forward to Wednesday night and to the debate starting in Milwaukee and for the debates to come to be able to lay out the truth to the American people.
Well, thank you, Governor. It was great to be with you. Great to have you. Good luck on this debate. I know all of us are going to be watching, and we just appreciate you telling the truth. That's what matters in this world, matters in this country. And frankly, that's the kind of leadership this country needs. So for all of you, thank you. Governor, thank you. I'll turn it now over to Kayla, who's got some more to go with. So thank you all.
Hey everyone, what a phenomenal conversation. Thank you, Congressman Kinzinger. Thank you, Governor Christie. I'm Kayla Espinoza with Country First, and I'm here to share something very special happening from September 11th to the 17th. It's called Dash for Democracy, and we want all of you to be a part of it. Are you wondering, what's Dash for Democracy all about? Well, imagine an entire week where we come together as a community, as neighbors, as friends to celebrate democracy and what makes our country special. It's not about politics, it's not about parties, it's about making a difference today and for generations to come. We're going to have a bunch of fun in-person and virtual social events. The ability to meet up with new and old friends for a virtual 5K across the country, and inspiration through our week-long speaker series, incredible public art displays, and a rockin' live stream concert event with Battle of the Bands, games, prizes, and so much more. The best part is we're not going to do this alone. Pro-democracy organizations from across the country are joining in to make Dash the celebration of American democracy. Country First is proud to convene these organizations to raise awareness and funds for groups working overtime to save democracy from forces working to undermine it. Beyond participating in the events, we hope you'll join Country First's Dash team. Set your goal and post about your own online fundraiser to your friends and family. It's a wonderful way to crowdfund for democracy. Plus, you can have a big impact and win prizes and prizes for the money that you raise. This empowers everyone, regardless of your financial situation. All you have to do is go to dashfordemocracy.us. That's .us. Choose the Country First team under fundraisers and get started. We're excited to team up with you and Dash for Democracy together.
In the tapestry of American history, democracy has been our guiding light, but not without its trials. It's been challenged, shaken, but never broken. Our democracy endured because of those who dared to protect it. Because democracy isn't just a government. It's you, it's progress, it's freedom. Our voices are the heartbeat of this nation. For centuries, it's shaped our path, celebrated our triumphs, and helped us correct our failures. This September, let's celebrate. Join thousands in the Dash for Democracy, a national celebration for anyone who loves America and what makes her special. Visit dashfordemocracy.us now to meet this unique movement.
Well, thank you, Kayla. I'm personally really excited about Dashing for Democracy, which has been 2 years in the making. We got a lot of fun things in store, so we really hope that you'll go to dashfordemocracy.us to sign up now. Join the Country First team. We have so many more organizations that are creating their teams this week. A bunch of different pro-democracy organizations, nonprofit organizations that are helping us solve and find durable, proven solutions to our problems. And so we're excited to come together for this nationwide celebration, and we can't wait to celebrate alongside y'all. Again, special thanks to Governor Christie and Congressman Kinzinger for joining us tonight for that fascinating conversation, especially just a few days before the first GOP primary debate. We'll all be watching all of that closely, and we'll be sure to share our thoughts with you. So now we've come to the end of this portion of tonight's program, but the party doesn't have to stop. For those of you who would like to participate in our optional breakout discussions with like-minded pro-democracy leaders and lovers from all across the country to hear what's on their mind after tonight's discussion, please head to country1st.com/breakout to join the fun. Again, that's country1st.com/breakout. And regardless, we appreciate you joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing some of you in the breakout rooms, and we hope you have a great week and you tune in on Wednesday night. Good night, everyone.